Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Please, you could find your seats. Yeshus Rabbi Axelrod. Whenever Rav Druckmann would get up and speak at the funeral of a person who'd been killed defending their country, he would start with the same phrase. And that phrase is, Od lo gamarnu, we have not yet completed the fight of Atzmaut, of independence. We have not yet finished the war of independence. And I think this year particularly, we feel that we have not yet finished that war. We continue to fight to be proud Jews in our country. And that's why we're here tonight. I'd like to take a moment to thank the organizations that have come together tonight to make this evening possible. To Bet Lochem, the Friends of the Israel Disabled Veterans, the Hostage Forum, RZA, Religious Zionists of America, Mizrahi, the Center for Peace Institute, and all the shuls, all the people who are here this evening coming together for the community. And I want to just say one special thank you to a person who never gets thank you because he's always doing it himself, and that's Rabbi Shalom Axelrod. We thank the County Executive Bruce Blakeman, who's been a true leader at such a time. Through good times and through difficult times, and the Nassau County Police Department who's been here for us at such difficult times. We're going to start the program this evening by hearing the siren. The siren we all know for those who've been in Israel at 11 o'clock on Yom hazikaron, which was just heard just a few hours ago. But this siren that we're about to hear is a siren which was sounded this morning in Israel at the Nachal Haredi ceremony with over 1,000 people there with the two chief rabbis of Israel, including the mission from the Young Israel of Woodmere. So with so many people from this community who are in Israel, this is the siren we're about to hear. I ask everybody to please rise for the moment of silence.
עם זכרם של חללי מערכות ישראל ופעולות האיבה, השם ייקום דמם. נבקש מהציבור לכבד את המעמד בקימה.
המשמר יפנה לימין, ימינה, נה.
Please be seated.
Rabbi Doron Perez, his wife Shelley, and their children, the family, encapsulates and personifies what the Jewish people have been going through since October 7th. Their son Yonatan was wounded on October 7th, and 10 days later, while their son Daniel was still missing and unknown about his whereabouts, they decided to go forward with Yonatan's marriage to Galia, highlighting that even with the difficulty, Am Yisrael still has to continue forward. And they endured the painful months not knowing about Daniel's fate until on March 17th it was confirmed that he had been killed in action with his remains still held in Gaza. The other children, Dina and Shira, together with their parents, have been a forceful example of courage, pride, strength, resilience, the word that so many of us have been using as we try to move forward, do our best to support our brothers and sisters in Israel these last 7 months. Rabbi Perez is the executive chairman of the World Mizrahi Movement. Originally from South Africa, he studied for 10 years in Israel, went back and served the Jewish community of South Africa before making Aliyah with his family to serve World Mizrahi, to serve the Jewish people. It's at moments like this, as we transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut, that we are reminded of the price that the Jewish people have paid, that the families of those who have been killed in action, those who have been killed in terrorist attacks, those families who still are in pain, the families of the hostage, as Natan Alterman described, the silver platter. State was not given to us in a silver platter. There's a cost that is paid, and that cost has to be recounted each and every year in order for us to appreciate the gift of the state of Israel. The first Yom HaAtzmaut, as Rabbi Perez mentions often, was a leap of faith. They didn't know what was going to happen. It wasn't until the following year that the tab started to be aware of what was coming due in terms of the losses. And for the 75 years since, as we celebrate Israel's 76th birthday, it's at moments like these when the inspiration for leaders like Rabbi Doron Perez and his family those words are important for us to hear to set the tone for this holy moment. We have a video presentation from Rabbi Doron Perez.
My name is Doron Perez, and I'm the executive chairman of the World Mizrahi Movement. One of the things we've tried so hard to do over the years at Mizrahi is highlight the national days, Yom HaAtzmaut, the privilege of a state of Israel, Yom HaZikaron, the price that we have paid. Who would have believed a year ago that I and our family, the Perezes, and our son Daniel, would be part of the story of the deceased families, of the bereaved families, the Mishpachot Shkulot of Yom HaZikaron. This Yom HaZikaron is unlike any other Yom HaZikaron. Here I am at Hostage Square, 133 hostages, including the body of our son Daniel. And you know, his story is perhaps like the story of the Jewish people this last year, since October 7th. He was first missing, then taken hostage, hopefully alive. Then we knew he was injured. Then we heard 163 days later that he was deceased. His body still held in Gaza. And our son Yonatan, who fought 100 meters away from Daniel, was injured himself. This Yom HaZikaron, here at Hostage Square this year, is unlike any other Yom HaZikaron that we, as the Jewish people in the state of Israel, have faced. Our son Daniel, what can I say about him? The most free-spirited, independent person that I knew. ADHD, adventure-seeking, fun-loving, always surrounded by friends, hundreds of friends he had. And a person who nothing could make him do what he didn't want to do. But if he wanted to do something, nothing could stop him. Indeed, when he was injured at the age of 18 in a wakeboarding accident and his profile was taken down, he fought with the army almost for a year so that at least he could go to Shirion. And indeed, his life led him on that fateful day to be an officer in the Israeli army, an outstanding soldier, ready to do whatever he needed to do to defend his people and homeland. You know, one of the gifts we got was his possessions which returned from Nachal Oz base. And in this we found a diary that we didn't know existed, that he began to write when he became an officer about 8 months before he passed. And in this diary, he writes about his responsibility as an officer. And what blew my mind when we opened to the first page in the diary, he says, Dvarim shani choshev alem lifnei hashena, the things that I think about before I go to sleep. And at the top of the list was, I understand what my mission is. When I went to Poland in high school, I understood the price we paid for not having a state. Now that I'm able to defend my country and people and home, it is my responsibility. And then he wrote the following 5 words in Hebrew, Im lo ani, as me. If not me, then who? Daniel, when he put on his army uniform, took all of those energies and adventure seeking and channeled them towards serving the Jewish people. And on that day, for those 2.25 hours, him and his tzevet, his crew, fought with such bravery, with such coolness, with one thing which we indeed wrote in his gravestone, Daniel ish chamudot, this beautiful, wonderful Daniel, like his forebear Daniel in the book of Daniel. And we wrote the following three expressions. We wrote, Davak b'mesima, he stuck to the task at hand. Lacham b'gvura, he fought with courage. Hitzil rabim, he saved so many. In the Shiva, two families from Nachal Oz kibbutz came to us in tears, saying that they felt that their families were saved by Daniel's tank. They read about what his tank did and their bravery, and relatively few people were taken hostage and killed in Nachal Oz. And they came to thank us on behalf of 133 children and families that perhaps Daniel's tank and his crew was the difference between life and death. You save one person, you save generations. On that, arguably the most fateful day in Israel's history, Providence decreed that our son Daniel and his crew would be where they needed to be to do everything they could to defend the people and state of Israel. I've been very involved in Yom hazikaron ceremonies throughout my life as a student, an individual, a Jew, and a Jewish leader. I never thought I would be a father of our beloved son Daniel, participating so integrally in this National Day of Commemoration. My feelings are mixed feelings of immeasurable pain and pride. So full of pride as a father for our son Daniel, that despite the immeasurable pain, if it was decreed last Rosh Hashanah that Daniel was to pass away, to do it in a way that he was where he wanted to be, giving everything he could to defend his fellow Jews and the state of Israel, to dial Kiddush Hashem with such altruism, commitment and dedication to his people is an honor. And I'm so proud to be his father, while my heart is so full of sorrow and pain. The story of the Jewish people, of course, is not only one of pain and suffering. Our family story also somehow reflects this Jewish story. It wasn't 10 days after our son Daniel was declared missing that our oldest son Yonatan, himself injured in the battle, limped to his wedding on the 17th of October to be married. And here we had this impossible task. On the one hand, to be full of appreciation for the son, the injured son that could have been killed, God forbid, that we have and is getting married, along with the pain, the difficulty for the son that we do not, Daniel, who was missing. Yet, perhaps the most profound thing that I've learned in the last 6 or 7 months is how these two live together. The pain and the pride, the simcha, the celebration together with the suffering, all indeed can and do live together. And I've come to see how this really is the story of the Jewish people. You see, it was Thomas Cahill, the famed American-Irish historian and writer, who said in his book, The Gifts of the Jews, that it was the Jews who gave humanity the concept of memory and history, to look back and to remember our past. And he said in the story of the Jewish people is the story of humanity, that all this pain and suffering, together with a celebration and their hope, works together. And that indeed is what Yom hazikaron, the day of memory and remembrance, is all about. Because straight from this day we go into Yom ha'atzmaut, the time of celebration, that these two go together, the difficulty and the celebration together. And so too from Tanit Esther we go straight into Purim. And indeed, the day of remembrance, when we remember Laman Tizkor Yom Tzeit Chameres Mitzrayim, where we sat together only a few weeks ago and together remembered what is the story of the Jewish people. And we tell our children, and we told them, and we tell them in every generation, Vehi she'amda, shebechol dor vador, indeed, in every generation there are pharaohs. There are those who wish to destroy us, to do everything that they can, and we have witnessed anti-Semitism and opposition as we speak to Israel and Jewish destiny, that who would have imagined in our lifetime we would see such a thing. But we are told, not only shebechol dor vador, we are told, V'hakadosh baruch hu matzilenu miyadam, that Hashem will save us and does and has always saved us and will once again save us with hope from them. And indeed, on this day there is so much bitterness. Our son, part of the bitterness, along with 1,500 others who've lost their lives, a bitterness that will always be throughout life, accompanying every experience of life, tinged with the bitterness of the maror with the lechem oni, the bread of affliction that our family and so many others have been afflicted by. But that is only part of the story. It's not the whole story. The matzah is also the bread of salvation, the Korban Pesach, and the future of Jewish destiny. And yes, there is indeed so much pain, so much loss, so much difficulty, but never despair. And that's why perhaps arguably the most central Jewish word is tikva, which appears kavel Hashem chazak v'yametz libecha. There is always tikva, v'yesh tikva lachriteh. There's always hope that no matter how painful and difficult life is, and so often is, there is pride, there is belief in Jewish destiny, there is a future. And part of this hope, specifically this year, as I sit in Hostage Square, along with the 133 empty chairs, that the body, the lifeless body of our son Daniel, should return with all of those to be buried with a kever Yisrael, a dignified Jewish burial. And the many who are alive, each and every one of them soon should be reunited with their families, and to bring each and every one of them home. The Jewish people will prevail. Am Yisrael Chai.
It was shortly after Korean War veteran Howard William Osterkamp of Ohio received this Purple Heart Medal that he would describe the experience of the Korean War in a way that came to be emblematic of all the horrors of war. He would say famously, all gave some gave all. It would seem that his words unfortunately apply to the 76 years of the State of Israel more than he ever intended. Because Yom hazikaron indeed realizes that some gave all. And throughout Israeli society, all have given some. Our next speakers, IDF Sergeant Dvir Fisher and Tzvi Wexler, National Development Director of Beit HaLochem, USA. They care for our wounded soldiers, ones whose lives will go on, but will never be the same. And together they see to it that their sacrifices are cared for as well.
Tonight, we stand in memory of our fallen heroes and salute to their sacrifice. But let us also remember the silent warriors, the wounded soldiers whose scars bear witness to their bravery. They carry the physical and the emotional burden of battle. But with the help of Beit HaLochem, supporting IDF wounded soldiers in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense and the government, their resilience shines as a beacon of hope. For over 3 decades, I worked with different communities in the United States to support the State of Israel and the IDF soldiers. The last year and a half have changed my life as I worked exclusively with Beit HaLochem USA, supporting the IDF wounded soldiers. We should honor them not just with words, but with support and gratitude. Their courage and sacrifice remind us that freedom is never free. We stand united in their honor, humbled by their sacrifice, and committed to the value they fought for. Never again, it's not just a slogan. It is a promise. It is a promise that relies on our unity. Am Yisrael Chai. We have with us tonight IDF Sergeant Major Dvir Fisher, who served in the Paratrooper 551 Commando Brigade and was wounded during an operation in Gaza. He will share with us his first-hand story. Dvir?
Ladies and gentlemen, hello, good evening. Today, as we honor Memorial Day for Israel's fallen soldiers and are between the switch to the Independence Day of the country of Israel, I, IDF Sergeant Major Dvir Fisher, stand before you humbled and grateful. This terrible war we're fighting caught me off guard in the Himalayas in Nepal. I was in some festival in nature with no reception, just living outside, sleeping in tents, living life like they lived thousands of years ago. And on October 7th, I had known nothing. For me, it was just another casual day. We woke up, did some sunrise trip, and swam in the river. And only a day later, on Sunday, a friend of mine came and told me something has happened. So I walked for about 2 to 3 hours to the village where there was reception. On the way there, I saw another friend of mine, an Israeli guy. I asked him, what's up? He said, not good, check your news. And I got to the village, and I saw I saw a lot of Israelis already on their phones, making phone calls, crying. I called my family to make sure that they're fine. I live in Jerusalem, but I have a lot of family that live in Moshav Shuva, which is right next to Be'eri and Ir Oz and Saad. I checked to see that they are fine. Baruch Hashem, they are. And then I asked my brother, how bad is it? He said, it's pretty bad. I said, how bad, like Yom Kippur? He said, yes. Then I opened the news, and I saw the headline of 400 people dead, hundreds are missing, tens of hostages, Israel is at war. And then I got to see some of the videos. And I understood also not only what happened, but the brutality of it. And I said, this is like the Holocaust. Like this is not something I never thought I would see. And this is why the IDF was formed, and this is why I joined my unit. And I said, I have to go back and fight this evil, because it's not only like what I want to, it's my moral duty as an Israeli and as a Jew, and I have this opportunity and this zchut to go and fight. It took me a week to go back to Israel through various ways, and I joined my units the day after I landed, and we prepared going into Gaza. And of course, you were very tensed before that. So during the time, again, I came from the Himalayas. I like yoga and all those mantras and meditation. So I taught my team, my platoon, some yoga exercises to like try to keep our minds off of what's happening and what's going to come. We got into Gaza on October 31st by foot into Bet Hanun, which is the northest city in the Gaza Strip, right next to Sderot. And we started doing our missions, and again, you're very tense and it's very stressing because you don't know what's going to happen. It could be a tunnel, could be RPG, could be a sniper, could be a drone that just flies over and drops a grenade, and there could be threat from anywhere. And after a week and a half of fighting, we were on our way to raid our next place, which was a UNRWA school that they were shooting a lot of rockets from and shooting at us from. After that, they also found a lot of ammunition, of course. And on our way there, we started running, and obviously you don't walk in Gaza, you skip, you run between the houses. It was my turn to skip, and I started running, and then I heard a round of shots that didn't hit me, but I understood it was close. I kept on running, and about 2 meters before I came in the door, I just felt extreme pain. I saw black, I collapsed, and my friends took me inside. Luckily, there was a doctor with us, and they started treating me. The evacuation was very quick. In about 40 minutes, I already was out, and Unit 669 took me in a helicopter to Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon. And then in the hospital, when I woke up, they told me actually what happened. That bullets, that I had a 1 to a million chance, miracle, because a bullet penetrated my neck from the left side through the right side. I don't know if you can see the bandage. Just through my neck, and it did not hurt anything. And the doctors in the hospital treated me and saved my life. Here with us sitting is Dr. Chava Levi's. She's up there. And thank you very much. And soon after my release from the hospital, I started my rehabilitation in Bet Halochem, in the compound of Jerusalem, and also my physical recovery and my emotional recovery. I do physiotherapy once a week. I go and swim, I exercise. It's also a great place to meet other fellow injured soldiers who have been through similar things, and we have this deeper connection of understanding what we're going through. And Bet Halochem has been an invaluable part of my physical and emotional recovery. And my journey echoes the sacrifice of all who served the state of Israel and protected it, because on the plane back to Israel from the east, I saw hundreds of young people who, just like me, cut their trip short and were ready to go and put everything on the line to protect our homeland. And tonight we remember our fallen soldiers, our brothers and our sisters, many of my friends amongst them, just that fell in battle. And we should honor the courage of every soldier and remember those who served, that others might live, and gave us this opportunity by sacrificing their life for us to keep on going and celebrating and being happy and just rejoicing the fact that after 2,000 years, Jewish people have a state and we have an army, and we can protect ourselves this time, because never again, like Tzvia said, it's not a slogan. It is a promise. And I want to wish us all a happy Independence Day, and may we all have bsorot tovot, good news, very, very soon, and may all the hostages come back And I thank you all very much.
On behalf of the entire community, Devere, we thank you for your courage, your sacrifice, for your example and inspiration.
Sergeant Fisher, Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly has tremendous plans for you ahead to allow you to come out of such an amazing and incredible moment and to stand here before us. Hashem clearly is with you. Hashem should continue to be with you. And we look forward to hearing and seeing the amazing things that you'll continue to do for Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban teaches us Shemichlal ha'avoda shalomdo Torah v'nispalal elav be'es hatzaros, that every single Jew is commanded that when we come upon times of difficulty and challenges, that we must daven. V'tihiyena einenu v'libeinu elav levado k'einei avadim al yad Adonaihem, and that during times of difficulty, that we only turn our eyes and our hearts towards Hashem. V'zeh k'inyan shekasuv, as it says in the Torah, v'chisavo milchama ba'artzachem, when war comes to your land, al hatzar hatzorer eschem, v'harosim b'chatzosros, v'niskartzem l'fnei Hashem Elokeichem, that during these times of difficulty and remembrance of suffering, that our hearts and our minds and our mouths turn towards Hashem for help, for guidance, and for comfort. Any tzara shetavo l'hatzibur la'atzok lefanav b'tefila u'b'trua. And therefore, for the next three presenters, we will have moments of tefillah. First, a kelmale, which is going to be recited by Chazan Joel Kaplan, followed by the tefillah for a chayalim sung by our friend and neighbor Shlomi Kaufman, which will be followed by the tefillah l'shom haMedina, led by Rav Binyamin Slaviter of the Irving Place Minyan.
Please rise. El molei rachamim shoyechene bameromim hametzei menuchonechoino Ale kanefe ashechino b'mahalos kedoshim tehorim v'giborim kizor horakia mazehirim esni Shemos HaKedoshim Shenilchamu Bechol Marachos Yisrael B'machteres Uvatzva Haganol Yisrael V'shenofelu b'milchamtom Umosru navshom Al kedushas Hashem ha'omer ve'ha'oretz. Ba'avur shon mispalelim li'ilui nishimoiseihem. Began Heiden tei menuchosom Lucheini balo rachamim Reim beseiser kinafov liyolamim vitzror bitzaror achayim esnish moiseihem nadinoi hu nachalosom ויונוחו ושלום על משכבויסיהם ושמוד לכל ישראל זכו סום ויעמדו לגוי עולם לקץ היומין ונאמר אמן. מי אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל העומדים על נשמע ארצנו ויראי אלוקינו מגבול הלבנון ויד מדבר מצרים ומן הים הגדול עליו הרבה ביבשה באוויר ובים הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל ונאמר
שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו. הגן עליו ברמת חסדך ופרוס עליו סוכת שלומך. ושלח ברך במיתך לראשי השרה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי בני ארץ קודשנו, הנחילם אלוהינו וישוע באתר תצחון ובאתרם. ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה. ותכינו כל בית ישראל פקודנו בכל ארצות בזוריהם, ותוליכם מהרה כמומיל לציון עירך, וישניים משכן שמך ככתוב בתורת משה עבדיך. אם יהיה נידחך בקצה השמיים, משם יקבצך אדוני אלוהיך, ומשם ייקחך. ויביאך אדוני אלוהיך אל הארץ אשר ירשו אבותיך וירשתה, ויטיבך וירבך מאבותיך. ויחד לבבינו להבל ירד שמך, ושמור את כל דברי תורתך, ושלח לנו מהרה בדוד משיח צדקך, לפתות מחכה קץ ישועתך. והופע בהדר גנוזך כל יושבי תבל ארצך, ויאמר כל אשר נשמה באפו, אדוני אלוהי ישראל מלך, ומלכותו בכל משלה, אמן, סלע.
Please be seated. Before I introduce the next speaker, I just want to acknowledge the physical presence of our county executive, Bruce Blakeman. Bruce, I'm going to ask you to stand up. Just so you should know, there's no one who would be in Israel quicker to show support than our county executive, Bruce Blakeman. However, he feels such a responsibility in keeping our community and entire county safe. Therefore, he stays here to ensure that there is peace in our entire community, in the entire county, and we're forever grateful for your dedicated work each and every day. In planning this evening's Yom hazikaron and Yom ha'atzmaut, commemoration and celebration, we obviously knew that this year, like was mentioned, is a year like no other. And whereas usually you focus on different things, this year there had to be at least some focus on the issue of the hostages. We as shul missions throughout these 5 towns have all been by Hostage Square, where we pledged not to forget, and to each and every day dedicate ourselves to bring them home. We want to welcome Liri Agami from the Hostage Forum of New York, who is with us this evening, and representing a hostage, Omer Shem Tov, is Liat Corinne Unger, his cousin. She is a speech pathologist, a passionate humanitarian activist, and has really dedicated herself since October 7th on behalf of the welfare of her dear cousin. Last week, many of our community were here where we heard from Einav Danino, the mother of Ori Danino, who was driving the vehicle that Omer was in. Please rise for Liat Unger and for what she has been doing on behalf of not just Omer, but all the hostages.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Sorry. Thank you for your patience and your understanding. It's challenging days. My name is Liat, and I would wish you good evening, but it's not a good evening just yet. It's 220 long days of a nightmare that we've been living with our families, our loved ones, living through hell. I'm going to tell you a bit about my cousin Omer. Omer Shem Tov, the beautiful blue-eyed boy who went to dance with his friends at a festival. On Friday night, October the 6th, his mother, Sheli, celebrated her 51st birthday. It was Erev Shishi, where they blessed the table. Interestingly enough, Omer's family is not religious, but Omer has a deep connection to the Kiddush. And so since he's around 6 or 7 years old, he recites the Kiddush for his family and blesses the table for his family every single Friday night. Happens to be his favorite thing to do, is to have the Shabbat meal with his family. And so Omer got to do that just before that Black Saturday. From there, Omer, after celebrating his mother's 51st birthday and reciting the Kiddush, went to the Nova Festival with his best friend Maya Regev and her younger brother Itai Regev. They danced, they celebrated, and at 6:29 we know the story from there. Sorry, I don't know how to make the feedback end, but Omer began his escape route with his best friends Maya and Itai while being on a live location share with his family on WhatsApp. A few hours earlier, we know that Ori Danino had met Omer and Maya and Itai on the dance floor. He never met them before, but he was worried about them because when Ori managed to escape the terror scene, he had the chance to leave back up north safely, but he chose not to. He chose to find a way to contact Omer, Maya, and Itai, and to go back and rescue them. And for that, I am eternally grateful, and I can't wait the moment to say thank you to Ori. Omer was tragically kidnapped with Maya and Itai when terrorists surrounded them on their escape route in Ori's car on Road 232. Terrorists surrounded them and fired ammunition, disabling the vehicle's engine, wounding Itai in his leg and severely wounding Maya. The terrorists surrounded the vehicle and viciously grabbed them and threw them into that infamous white pickup truck. All while on live location share, his mother Shelley, his father Malki, his brother and sister Dana and Amit watched their brother's phone signal move into Aza. On the last ceasefire deal in November, we were blessed with the return of our beautiful, about 100 hostages. And among those hostages were Itai and Maya. They shared that they were taken into Aza together, paraded around, celebrated as if they were trophies. And Maya was immediately taken to hospital because of her severe injury. But Itai shared that he was kept with Omer for 54 days. He shared lots of struggles. Omer doesn't have his inhaler, and he's asthmatic, so he can't breathe, and he's not allowed to cough. Omer has celiac disease, and he's only given pita to eat, so he's in tremendous pain, but he's eating to survive. But the thing that he shared that sticks with me most is the story of hope. Omer's favorite thing to do is recite the Kiddush. And in captivity, Omer rations his food, scrapes the salt off of his pretzel. If he's given a juice, he rations it. He rations his pita, and not one Friday night went by without him reciting the Kiddush and bringing light into the darkness of Hamas. And that is Kedusha, and that is Emunah. That story is what gives me the courage and the strength to get up and stand here for 220 days, exhausted, to fight for him, because that is the light we all need to bring back into this world. Omer and 132 other beautiful lights who are surviving, doing everything they can to come home. Yom hazikaron and Yom ha'atzmaut, that sharp transition kept me numb in my bed all day. And so I took time to write. And I wanted to share the one thing that I wrote with you. Yom ha'atzmaut, But this year, it is not a celebration. It merely serves as a reminder of our fierce determination. Today marks 76 years that we have procured our country and our courageous army that no one can touch. But why then does it ache and torment me so much? A privilege to be part of a nation of heroes who fight for us on all fronts, in spite of the ignorance of the world that continues to affront. Brave soldiers who protect our very existence, who do it with pride, devotion, and persistence. Another reminder of what is etched into our DNA, resilience. For we are Israel, the one and only Jewish state. We will never allow anyone to determine our fate. Surely that is something that we should celebrate. Yet here we are, still fighting, still struggling for our very own survival, for our true independence, and for our glorious revival. Battling the endless tears, fighting off my worst fears, on a day that I should be celebrating with pride. Yet all I want to do is scream and hide. The pain is enormous, the emotions are charged. How can we celebrate when our families are still being harmed? 220 days, our brothers and sisters, our children are in dangerous bondage after facing October 7th's devastating carnage. They are not safe, nor are they independent, in case you have forgotten. Our reality of Atzmaut has truly become degraded, even rotten. In 2024, that is beyond comprehension and moral acceptance. How then can we celebrate our nation's true independence? I'll leave you with a final thought, but the story that I shared of Omer's resilience and his hope and his emunah in captivity, it brings me back to the stories that we read from the Holocaust. And the difference between October 7th and the Holocaust is that now we have a country, now we have a state, and now we have an army to defend us and do everything in their power to save us, to protect us, and in this case, to bring us home. The promise of never again is one that we must fulfill. And so when we think back to the Holocaust, and we think back, and if we read those stories, if you ever asked yourself, what would I have done to save just one life? Just one. You would have saved generations. Here we have the chance to save 132 lives. We have a chance and we just need to take it. And so when I think to our ancestors who would be so proud that we are their future, what would our ancestors, the ones who perished in the Holocaust, say if we allowed 132 of our brothers and sisters to be left behind in Gaza? We continue to pray, but we must also take action. Please continue to fight for their return home, their safe return home. Thank you for your time. Thank you to the congregation, and thank you to Rabbi Axelrod.
Over the last 7 months, we've seen many supporters of the Jewish people of the State of Israel come and go. But as we know, the one true shomer, the one true supporter, who's been there for all of eternity, Kadosh Baruch Hu Matzilenu Miyadam, he's the one that we turn to day in and day out, to daven, to pray for the ultimate salvation, and Yeshua from this terrible tzara. Please rise as we daven together to the true Shomer Yisrael. Shir lamalos esay nayel he'arim me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai yosei shamayim v'oretz. Al yitein lamot raglecha, al yanum shomerecha. Hinei lo yanum v'lo yishan, shomer Yisrael. Adonai shomrecha, Adonai tzilecha, al yad yaminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka, v'yareach b'alayla. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra, yishmor es nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzescha voecha, me'ata v'yad olam. Please remain standing for the tefillah for the Chatufim by Rabbi Binyamin Slaveter.
Mi sheberech Avosenu Avram Yitzchak v'Yaakov Yosef Moshe Aaron v'David Shlomo Yivarech v'Yishmor v'Yinsor es nederei tzoah Ganal Yisrael Shvuav es kol achenu anasunu b'tzar v'shivya shekol hakal kadosh hazeh mispal b'avuram HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei rachem yimaleihem yotzihem michoshech matzal maves Mosrozem yinatek mitzosehem yoshiem Yoshivei Mehera Lechek Mishpachoseihem Yodu Ladonai Chazon Niflosov Nebnei Adam Koyem Bem Mikra Shekasuv Doye Adonai Yeshuvun Vod Zion Brina Simcha Solam Arosham Sasun Usimcha Yasigu Nasu Avonu Anacha V'Namar Amen Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael Anasunim Batara Batzara Uvashivia Omdim Bein Bayam Ubein Bayavasham Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael Anesunim Batzara Batzara Uvashivia Omdim Bein Bayam Bein Bayavasham Hakom Yirachem Yirachem Aleim Siyem Yitzara Ervachom Yafeil Aliyara Bun Ligiulashta Agala Ubizman Karim Makom Yirachem Yirachem Aleim Siyem Yitzara Ervachom Yafeil Aliyara Kibun Ligiulashta Bagala Ubizman Karim. If everyone can sit, please.
Just before I introduce our featured speaker, I just want to call upon our county executive, Bruce Bakeman, just to share a few words with us.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Axelrod, all the distinguished Rabbanim that are here, our Nassau County Chair of the Commission to Combat Anti-Semitism, my Rabbi, Rabbi Weinstock, thank you. Malcolm Holine, for your years and decades of service to the Jewish people, thank you for joining with us today. Liat, thank you for your advocacy, and we will pray each and every day for the safe return of Omer and all of the hostages. Thank you for being with us tonight. To our Sergeant Major Fisher, Baruch Hashem that you survived what would have been a deadly wound, to be here with us and to continue to advocate for the IDF soldiers that put their life on the line each and every day, not only to protect Israel, but the Jewish people throughout the world. Judge Ari Shulman, thank you so much for your friendship through the years. A great public servant here in Nassau County. So, some of you might wonder why I'm dressed the way I am. This is National Police Week, and we had festivities all day to honor our men and women of law enforcement. As a matter of fact, yes, let's hear it for them. As a matter of fact, Fox and Friends, of all the police departments in the United States, to kick off Police Week, they singled out our department. And this morning they were on our department. So we thank the men and women of our Nassau County Police Department for keeping us safe. A year ago, I was here under very different circumstances. We are in a total different state right now. Over 700 IDF soldiers have been killed. Over 800 civilians have been murdered. 2 days after October 7th, Nassau County came together with 6,000 people at Eisenhower Park, Jews of every affiliation and non-Jews, to support Israel. What is disturbing is that since that time, some of that support has dissipated. Some of our elected officials have betrayed us. They have called for a ceasefire without the return of the hostages as a precondition. They have called for regime change in Israel in the middle of a war. That is disgraceful. And we must be strong and united and remember those who supported us in our darkest times and those who have not. I was in Israel on Memorial Day and Independence Day a few years ago with my wife Sigal. An amazing experience. If you haven't been there, let me tell you, it is one of the most solemn and important experiences that I have ever had. On Memorial Day in Israel, they sound the siren twice a day. And when the siren goes off, everything stops. Even if you're driving in your car on the highway, you pull over, you exit your car, and you stand in respect for the fallen soldiers until the sirens go off. I wish we had that here in America. We celebrate Memorial Day, we have parades, we remember, We have picnics, barbecues, but there is a little bit of that solemn part that can be missing. But they get it in Israel. And that's always followed by Independence Day, where we celebrate the independence of Israel. So it has been a very different and difficult year since I was here last year. But we must remain strong. We must remain united. We must combat anti-Semitism. Here in Nassau County, we have a very different policy than other parts of the country. If protesters want to come and exercise what they call the First Amendment right to free speech, we give them a place on the sidewalk. If they step off the sidewalk, our police officers will politely tell them to get back on the sidewalk. If they do not, they are arrested. There are no tents, there are no plywood buildings, there is no occupation, there is no harassment, there is no violence, and this is a standard that we must hold throughout America. So, I thank you all for being here tonight. It's important, incredibly important, to show our strength, our courage, and our fortitude. May Hashem bless each and every one of you. May Hashem bless the state of Israel. And may Hashem bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Please be seated. Before I introduce our featured speaker, I just want to thank our Five Towns community member, Mr. Marty Olener, co-president of the Religious Zionists of America, Mizrahi, who was instrumental in working with our speaker and trying to ensure that we would have a very meaningful program for this evening. Our speaker almost needs no introduction. He's been to this pulpit many times. He's a friend of the community, and that is Malcolm Hoenlein. Malcolm is CEO Emeritus of the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations, and he's president of the organization Abraham Spirit. He is an accomplished member of so many different boards of organizations that it's impossible to list almost. But I will say this: he is a defender of the Jewish people. And no matter where that battle takes him, he will go and he will fight the fight. With a kippah, a yarmulke, making a kiddush Hashem in everything that he does. And who could better be here to address us in these very difficult times that American Jewry faces at this time? And so, Malcolm, it's really a big honor for us for you to spend Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom hazikaron with us. Please come.
Thank you, Rabbi, and the other Rabbanim. And thank you, my friend Bruce Blakeman, with whom I've worked over many years. Don't worry, it gets louder as I go on. You may want to say quiet later, but the truth is I was thinking for a long time about what I would say tonight. What do I say to a community that has done so much and does so much and is so committed? what can I add to the words of the relatives of the hostages or somebody who has served in the IDF? I hope I can add something to this discussion. After more than 6 decades in leadership positions in the community, I can tell you that this is one of the best communities that I've ever come to and have come to repeatedly. And I came to say thank you to you as well for the leadership, and not just Marty, and I see Steve and other people here, many presidents of organizations within the conference who have served and who do serve. And you deserve the Hakaras HaTov as well. We're still in Yom hazikaron. Today, we crossed the 25,000 mark of people who sacrificed their lives in the defense of Israel since 1860 when they started counting. You heard the numbers of soldiers, the numbers of civilians who died at the hands of terrorists. Each one of them is a world. Each of us feels that loss. This is what arevut really means, a sense of responsibility, but that we feel what's in the hearts of the families of the hostages, the families of the soldiers. I was with Doron Peretz's son at his army base a few days before his wedding. The courage, the commitment, he was consoling us. One of the features of this period of our calendar, which starts with Purim and Pesach, Yom HaShoah, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, and ends on Shavuos, is one theme, Zechirah, remembrance. The word symbolizing the Shoah wasn't Nakama, revenge. It was Zachor, remember. The word, the date for those to remember those who fell defending Israel is Yom HaZikaron, because remembrance keeps their presence alive with us. Remembrance is not history. There is no Hebrew word for history. Zikaron is a dynamic process where we look at what led to things and we look at what flowed from them. Because only by doing that can we learn the lessons of the past. Jews uniquely look back in order to look forward. History for us is about the future. So this Yom HaZikaron is a time when we can rededicate ourselves to understanding how we got to where we are, the lessons of history, and how we apply it to the future so that we never again have to go through a year like this past one. The first Rashi in Chumash tells that Rabbi Yitzchak was asking why the Torah begins with Bereshis, and why it doesn't begin with the first mitzvah, Rosh Chodesh. And Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says, the question isn't what the world will say, why we begin with this. Because what is Rav Yitzchak's answer? That the people will say, you stole this land. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, I created the world, I gave this land to the Jewish people for all time, for all, no matter what happens in the history between now and then. And he said, so when the nations of the world said, Listim atem, you're robbers, you point to this. And you say, God created the world. And he promised it to Abraham and to all the generations that would follow. And Shimshon Raphael Hirsch says that's true. But it isn't because of what the Goyim will say. It's because of what the Jews will say. He said when Jews have doubts, when Jews aren't convinced of our right to the land, that's when we have to worry. And how many times in the last year have we seen those Jewish voices, young and old, being raised, putting forward questions? No one should have been surprised by what happened on October 7th. Reference was made to Agada B'chol Dover Omdim Aleinu L'Chaloseinu. It doesn't say Amdu Aleinu. It doesn't use the past tense. It uses the present tense to remind us every year when we sit at the Seder to look around at the dangers. And Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal once asked, you mean every generation there wasn't one that didn't have it? And he said, look at the next paragraph. Tzei ulamad, lavan bikesh la'akar sakol. He said, read the next paragraph on the Haggadah where we read about Lavan and plotting against his son-in-law, Yaakov Avinu. That Yaakov, who was growing his family, he didn't like his father-in-law, but he lived in relative peace, growing his flocks, becoming wealthy, satisfied, and all the time Lavan was plotting against him. So those generations, and certainly in recent years, who thought we were in the Golden Medina, that there would be no more threats, that what happened 80 years ago could never happen again, are woken up to the reality. B'chol dar v'dar. And you know, when I came here more than 10 years ago, I spoke about the danger of anti-Semitism. I talked about what was happening on campuses and about Iran. And I know people were skeptical, and many came to me and said, but we don't experience it. All that time they were plotting. This was 10 years in the making. This didn't just happen, neither what happened on the borders of Israel or what's happening on the campuses in America. I know it's not easy for us to always talk about these things. You know, Socrates was once asked why he was never sad, and he said it because there's nothing the loss of which would make me sad. We are sad because we care. What other people in the world care about a hostage who they don't know, whose relatives they don't know, who have never met them and will never meet them? What other people make the sacrifices that Jews make? How many of them relate to an event like October 7th? How many people on 9/11, even in our own country, felt it? Maybe for a day or two. But each of us have lived in October 7th every day. It is a watershed in Jewish history. And those who don't know it, you will. Because we haven't yet felt the full impact of what occurred. I was in Israel for Sukkot, and after Yom Tov, I got a call asking me to come to Hadassah Hospital, that there were some American lone soldiers, and they had asked to see me. And I went there, honestly, reluctantly. And the first three I met, I knew their families. One from Toronto, one from Texas, and one from New York. And each of them just talked about how they wanted to go back to fight. One had a very serious wound, and he's still not healed to today. But the one thing each of them said to me is, if you don't see it, you can't tell it. And I said, it's not a good idea. They don't let civilians down. They don't. And each one said it to me. And 2 hours later, I was in Sderot, and I was in Be'eri when they opened it up. I saw it. I can't describe it. I speak about a lot of things, but I never speak about that. To walk and be pushed by a young soldier and say, don't step there because we're looking for DNA. They burnt a little baby at that location. To be taken to a chewing gum truck, and the soldier said to me, please come with me. And I tried to, and I couldn't walk past this brick wall, which wasn't there. But there was a stench and a smell, and there was something so strong, I literally couldn't penetrate it, and he pulled me through it. And he opened the door of the truck, and there already were 40 bodies assembled that they had picked up in Be'eri. It is a life changer. We saw evil only reminiscent of what the Holocaust brought to us. And each of us has to make a decision how we respond to it. How do we answer the call to action? How do we respond to the threats to annihilate not just the Jewish state, but the Jewish people? Read the charter of Hamas. It doesn't mean them, it means all of us. We have gone through a major shift. For many of us, including me, I begin to understand what my grandparents experienced in 1943 when they were sent to concentration camps. You begin to feel it, to understand it in ways that we could not before. But this is not just about Israel, and it's not just about Jews. This is about the future of the world. This is about the future of America. And we see our values being mocked and denigrated. We are bit players in this greater picture. A victory over Hamas is an essential, not just for Israel's survival. It's a moral imperative. It's a security demand for the future of the world. Every Arab leader says to me, in every conversation of the last 6 months, decimate them, tell Israel, don't listen to what we say, just kill them all, because if not, we're next. Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, every ally of the United States, they know that they are the next in line. And yet we see a generation of young people, so many of them falling victim to the lies, the distortions, the misrepresentations. You know, it took Hitler months to spread the big lie. Today it's done in nanoseconds on the internet. Mark Twain once said, if you don't read a newspaper, you're ill-informed. If you read a newspaper, you're misinformed. It's even more true today. The lies abound. You cannot trust what you see, what you read, or what you hear. Can any of us imagine what would have happened had they succeeded on October 7th? What would our lives be worth without a Jewish state, without the state of Israel being strong and vibrant? The big lie has taken hold. How many of us read about the hospital supposedly destroyed by Israel, only to find out that it was an errant Hamas rocket? How many of you believe the stories about the famine in Gaza? Do you know that 280,000 trucks have gone into Gaza? Double what went in before the war, before October 7th. They complain there's no electricity and no water because they used the pipes to make rockets. Israel supplied the electricity and water for free to Gaza. There are 36 hospitals in Gaza. That's more than in Saudi Arabia. Go and look at the pictures of the markets in all the areas of Gaza. Particular areas may have shortages, but they can walk a mile and get all the food they want. Israel supplies to 15 bakeries, 2 million loaves of bread a day. But the world says Israel is starving people. You read the numbers of how many people were killed. Do you know that today the United Nations acknowledged that their numbers of women is less than half of what they said, and the number of children even less than that? So if you take their figure of 34,000, which is a Hamas figure, and you reduce it by the 10,000 they took away and the 14,000 or 15,000 who were terrorists, it means that 9,000 civilians were killed. That's the lowest kill ratio in all of human history, because we have an army that sacrifices itself for the safety of these civilians. The lies, the blasphemous lies continue, and unfortunately, too many in our own community, too many of our own young believe this. The United Nations explanation was the fog of war. The United Nations is constantly in a fog. This is no different. But they were willing to libel the Jewish people, the Jewish army, the Jewish state, with this constant stream of lines, and don't think they go away. You can't erase it. You can't convince people today. Once they read it, they believe it. 40% of young people in America don't believe October 7th. 25% don't believe the Holocaust anymore. The impact will be with us for a long time. There are people who understand why this is so significant. General Milley, who was the commander of the CENTCOM and then chairman of the U.S. Chiefs of Staff, said Israel has the right to defend itself. They were the ones who attacked, and goes on to the slaughter and talked about it, and he said this was stuff not even a hair's breadth removed from what the Nazis did. And if you do the math, it means that in America, that would be 50 to 100,000 people dead in a morning. Can you imagine what we would do? Israel has acted with restraint, maybe too much restraint, listening to the advice and importunings. We have seen the world respond, not to the hundreds of thousands who are starving and have been killed in Sudan or Nigeria, not to the Houthis, not to the Rohingya, not to the 600,000 killed in Syria, not to the hundreds of thousands killed in Iraq, only those killed in Gaza. It is not a surprise when Israel is singled out, but we know that ultimately the truth will come out. We see elements within our own government, people who belong to the dawn democracy in the Arab world now, who are influencing policy. You can read about certain individuals in the government who were founders of SJP, Students for Justice in Palestine, and today occupy very critical positions. We see people fired because they were reporting directly to the foreign minister of Iran about their invitations and end up becoming the chief of staff of one of the most delicate offices in the Department of Defense. No, it does not make any sense. The United States and Israel have to be together for both sake. Israel is fighting the war for the West and the war for America. We are fighting the war against Iran. Iran has created the ring of fire that I warned about when I came here many years ago. With the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, the militias in Syria and Iraq, their efforts to overtake Jordan. Iran is not a local threat, it's a global threat, because that ring of fire exists in South America with Nicaragua, Cuba, Bolivia, Venezuela. And their target isn't Israel, but the United States. Today, Iran could be destroyed in one night, not with nuclear weapons, but by pulling the plug and supporting the people, 90% of whom want this government gone, 80% of whom support Israel. In the major events, sports events of the week, a soccer game held every Saturday in stadia across Iran, they called for a moment of silence for the Palestinian victims. And as soon as they announced it, the people, tens of thousands each of the stadia, started blowing horns and screaming, "Death to the dictator, death to the dictator." But their greatest disappointment is that nobody in the West cares. We could remove the greatest threat, and you remove them, you remove the whole string of fire, you change the whole Middle East. Iran's economy is hanging by a thread, despite the money that they get because we removed sanctions. Their currency is 641,000 to the dollar. So it isn't that we don't have the opportunities to make change. It's when the world doesn't understand, they don't face reality, they don't want to hear it. They will rather engage in all the lies. Palestinians get no treatment in Gaza. There are 8 field hospitals that Israel has helped set up. They can treat everybody that needs the treatment. I could go through all of the list of the lies that you and everyone else is being fed. So don't fall for the lies and the distortions. Israel and Israeli soldiers are risking their lives on behalf of those who live there. Who guards the pier that was just built? Israeli soldiers. Who makes sure that the food gets in only to be stolen by Hamas? It's not because there isn't enough food, it's because Hamas steals it and sells it. Because they feed their own and then take advantage of the people. Iran celebrated October 7th and paid tribute to the Americans, students, who have engaged in this revolution. And do you know that Khamenei has extended an invitation to any of the students who get thrown out of American universities to come to Tehran University? May I suggest we take up an appeal and pay for their tickets? They also, by the way, were matched by the Houthis, who have offered them seats at the University of Sana'a. Believe me, you don't need to buy a return ticket for them. We look at what goes on at the vaunted United Nations, which this week voted, this past week on Friday, to recognize Palestine in the General Assembly and to give it all sorts of rights. What did they do to earn it? Why would they reward the terrorists? Why would they, in fact, give the sanction to what they did on October 7th by declaring all of a sudden an entity that can't govern its own to be able to become a member of this distorted institution? The ICC, the International Criminal Court, is weighing charges against Israelis, and our young sergeant, like every other officer of the Israeli army, could be subject to prosecution in any country they visit, in any place that they go. The International Court of Justice is weighing action against Israel. And then the charge of genocide. Genocide in Gaza. You know how many people lived in Gaza in 1967 when Israel came? 400,000. You know how many live there now? 2.1 million. They're really bad at genocide. There is no separation from what we've seen in the Middle East to what you're seeing on the campuses. Tens of billions of dollars have flowed into our universities from foreign sources, and we're going to release this week a study that will show many billions of dollars targeting the demonstrations and the groups behind them from communist China. That's in addition to $6.5 billion we've already traced to Qatar, $4.5 billion that were traced to other Arab countries, a total of almost $13 billion from them. And you know, in exchange, universities gave them blocks of admissions for their students. And believe me, they're not sending the academically qualified because they can get in anyway. And that they send money for the more than 30,000 Arab students studying in the United States, the more than 25,000 Chinese students who are studying here every year, in addition to the tens of thousands who are coming illegally across our border from the south. The foreign funding issue is one we've only begun to understand. But this has been going on for many years. It was Saudi Arabia years ago, but they stopped. It was the UAE also years ago, and some of them underwrote legitimate academic activities. But this is not just about our colleges. They are funding in our high schools, including here in Queens, New York, Arab centers that have maps for 10 years with no Israel on it, but Palestine is. Nursery schools across the United States are teaching their children about the wheels on the tank go round and round and attacking Israel. There are programs in high schools, and thank God parents are starting to organize. We have thousands of public school parents, Jewish public school parents, who have now joined organizations across the country, but it's only the tip of the iceberg as well. The schools refuse to respond and reject the importunings, and we better make room in all our yeshivas for a lot of kids because they have no place else to go. If you knew what we have found already about what they are teaching, and it's not just the students, it's the faculty. You saw that at New School, it's the faculty that did the encampment. Look who lined up outside the library of Columbia University, faculty locked arms in arm together. They went into the encampment to teach, and they protested against their universities, threatening all to resign, which would be a welcome development and raise the academic level of Columbia a lot. I can't take the time now, and I won't, to go through university by university about what is really happening. I went with 20 kids from 20 universities to Washington with Olami. And all we did was meet with congressmen, and these young people told what happened to them. A young girl at Drexel University tells how they set fire to her dorm door on a Friday night. A young boy walking home from a Chabad Friday night meal got beaten up, put in a hospital. In every one of the 20 universities did nothing. Refused them anything in but 2 cases where they said, we can give you mental health counseling. It's the universities that need the mental health counseling. And this is true across the country. You all saw the hearing that 3 presidents of prestigious major universities could not say that calling for death of Jewish students didn't violate university standards. So we have opportunities to do good, to make a difference. We have legislation, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, the Student Protection Act, many others. We are bringing lawsuits against universities. We have visits to members of Congress and having congressmen put pressure on the educational institutions, the Department of Education, which does nothing, thank God, because if they did it, they would screw it up. But on the state and federal levels, we have to push. We can't stop. We have to get law enforcement to live up to their responsibilities, as you heard is being done here in Nassau County. The foreign funding story is not going to be a pleasant one when we find out how many people have been involved and how many institutions have become part of it. This is not in a time for compromise or appeasement with such evil as we have witnessed. There has to be concrete expressions of love, support, commitment for one another, and to stand up for our own defense. Hate, let alone such barbarity, threatens us all. Each of us in our own way, every institution, every shul, every yeshiva, every organization, every chesed organization must infuse in its work with inspiration, with courage, with mission to stand up, to teach our children to stand up, to educate them about the problems, because believe me, the kids in our best institutions don't know. We tested it. They can't answer. And when they have doubts, we have to worry. That's why the first Rashi and what Hirsch said was so important, because we see it played out now with children from the best homes and have gone to the best institutions. We have to join forces. We have to come together. Unity is not homogeneity. It means a recognition that what we have in common far outweighs our differences. Each of us, no exceptions, no excuses, must take achrayut, must take responsibility. We have to join the defense force and offense forces of the Jewish people. Others will follow us. We took on the Soviet Union, we took on Syria, we took on Iran, we took on Ethiopia, Yemen, Iran, Iraq to rescue Jews against all odds. And we won, just as we overcame those who attacked us over the centuries. Hep, hep, from the time of the Romans till the Nazis, they would yell, Jerusalem et perdita, Jerusalem is lost, because that was a proclamation that the Jewish people were over, that we would have no future. Jerusalem is there, it is ours, it will be ours forever, but we can't take it for granted. In 1948, a Jewish state was an impossibility, they said. 100 million Arabs stood against us in 1948. And again in 56, 73, and over again throughout our history. And we see Hamas and all of the others that are aligned, Hezbollah with its 160,000 missiles, the hundreds of millions, in fact billions of dollars that are being spent against Israel over the decades. They cannot stand against a united Jewish people. If we stand together, we can overcome every challenge. We focus on our common interests, our common goals, the aspirations we have for our children, and the common fate that we have, and the common faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our Torah. There is a lot to celebrate. And now as we come into Yom HaAtzmaut, it's time to reflect, even with all of the bitterness that we feel, to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving us the Jewish state, for giving us Yerushalayim, that we will not take it for granted, that we will show and we appreciate it by our deeds. That, the Italians have a saying, don't look at the mouth, look at the hands. Look at what people do. Simcha has to be infused in all that we do, and they say it's the most difficult mitzvah to fulfill because we see the world and it becomes overpowering sometimes. Take a lesson from the soldiers in Israel. A poll today showed 90% of them want to finish the job, want to go back. Even the wounded, even those who have lost limbs, go back to their units. We should be inspired. We should stand up proudly, not hide our Jewish identity, not hide our Jewish symbolism, not hide our Jewish community and our affinity for Israel. Like the college students who stand up proudly and declare, "We are Zionists," standing at the gates, knowing that they risk themselves, we have to proclaim it as well. Each of us, in our own way. Our institutions have to be an inspiration, but we also have to see to it that our enemies understand where we stand. We draw that line in the sand. Many friends, in fact, most Americans, will stand with us. The polls show overwhelmingly the American people want Israel to go into Rafah and want to stand with Israel. 57% of the young people from 18 to 25. Look at Senator Fetterman, who when he was elected, no Jews, everybody looked at him. Looked at him in fear about what was going to happen to this senator who didn't own a pair of pants to come to. He's up 14% in the polls. President Biden, whose two-state solution is Michigan and Wisconsin, has to understand that the American people will stand with him if he stands with Israel. Tens of millions of evangelicals, just 10 million alone in Kufi. And anybody who's not gone to one of their conferences, go to it. You will be inspired. You'll come back. You'll light up your own shuls and institutions to see what it means to be a real Zionist, to stand up for Israel more proudly than any of us do. We have to change the faculties. We have to change the mood at the universities. We have to have more people like Rowan and Ackman and others who will stand up, cut their contributions, get the alumni, get everybody that we can to stand up against those institutions. How many presidents have had to resign? Nobody would have anticipated. If you can't say with total clarity or with conviction that the threats against Jewish students is a violation of your rules, then you don't belong in the office. Congress is with us. They voted 366 to 58, 79 to 18 to pass the aid for Israel. They will overrule the president if he really tries to withhold the weapons from Israel. Israel will survive. Israel will accommodate. I'm not sure America can, because we will lose every ally who looks to Israel as the bellwether, that if Israel can't rely on the relationship with the United States, who can? So go out and register every single person in your community and make sure everybody goes to vote. You have great congressmen from this region, but they don't take it for granted. We have to stand up to it. When I did a campaign, the first voter registration campaign more than 50 years ago, I got Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, the Deborah Tziner, and others all to sign a public ad saying it's a chiyuv for every Jew to go and vote. So all of you who care, you care about everything else, care about this. Because politicians can do little, but they can all count. And they know who votes and who doesn't vote. And you want to understand why there are things to celebrate and why we can be more optimistic. Who came in second in the Eurovision in the popular vote? No one thought she would even get on stage. They try to block Israel. But when Finland gives 9 of its votes, when Ireland gives 10 of its 12 votes to Israel, that tells the true story. So this is a time from this we can learn. The boos, the threats, isolating her in her hotel room, and she emerged proud as a queen as she came into the airport in Israel and greeted as a malka. Millions of Christians are waiting for us, just as they did during Soviet Jewry. We didn't free Soviet Jews. Soviet Jews were responsible. But our campaign gained national prominence, became the #1 human rights cause in the world. Many of you marched. And the non-Jews joined us only if we're there first. So now we have to stand with Israel. And they will join us. They will stand with us if we're there and they are convinced. Too many Jews are backing away from Israel. Everything that has happened over the last year can be seen as a blessing or a curse. It says, bracha uklala, a blessing and a curse. To teach us that what we do with it determines whether it will be a blessing or a curse. Your actions, each of you, can make a world of difference. You may not think so, but I'm telling you, each of you has a contact, each of you has a connection, each of you can write a congressman, each of you can write the White House, each of you can go to a demonstration. You can all do something. You can't do everything, but you can all do something. And if you care about the world of your grandchildren and their grandchildren, if you care about their security and the kind of life that they will lead, you will fulfill the mandate that each of us is given, uvacharta v'chaim, to choose life. Choosing life is not whether you commit suicide or not. Choosing life is by the actions we take. And every single day you make choices of life and you're not even conscious of it. But if you came to Washington and if you came to the demonstrations here and if you stood up and you gave and you wrote and you helped the chesed organizations and all of those things, you made a choice of life for yourself but for your future generations. And this is a time when each of us is going to be measured. You know, Bnei Yisrael was cursed because we saw ourselves kachagavim. We saw ourselves as grasshoppers. It wasn't because the enemy saw us as grasshoppers. It's how we see ourselves, how each of you see yourself. You're a giant. You can take on the whole world. We took down the Iron Curtain. All the powers in the world couldn't do it, but a handful of Jews did it. And we can do it now. We can't become depressed. We can't become saddened by what we see to the point that it cripples us. We have to remember the victims. We have to pray for them. We have to stand every day and recall what they did. But frankly, it's time when we have to choose life. I don't want any more memorials to dead Jews. The world is too good at that. They know how to mourn us, but they don't know how to stand up for living Jews and a living Jewish state. No more. Never again is about yesterday, today, but most of all about tomorrow. And this is a time when each of us has to make that declaration. Make that promise to your grandchildren and their grandchildren, because they will turn back and judge you. They will ask, what did you do? Just as we judged a generation of 80 years ago. And ask, what did they do? It wasn't because they didn't know. They knew everything. Today, you know everything. You see it on your computers and your news. You can get access to all the information instantly, sometimes even before it happens. The question is, what do you do about it? Do you rise to the challenge? And you will bring many others with you, so that when your grandchildren look back and they judge you and ask you, what did you do at that critical time in Jewish history? They will praise you and thank you for making it a safer world for them.
Thank you, Mr. Honlein, for your presence, for your thought-provoking and poignant message, and your penetrating words. Please rise as we call upon Chazan Joel Kaplan to lead us in the Song of Hope, HaTikva.
Kol od balevav penima nefesh Yehudi homiya ulefate mizrach kadima ayin letzion Sophia od lo vedot tikvatenu hatikva בת שנטה לפיים, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
As we conclude our program, again, I just want to give our tremendous thank you to Rabbi Axelrod, to the entire Gizral of Woodmere staff. As we have the opportunity, the difficult transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut, making sure that everybody is aware, at the Israel Chesed Center on 1350 Peninsula Boulevard right now going on Yom HaAtzmaut celebration with live music and food and opportunity to celebrate that which we need, as well as two other programs in 3 weeks from yesterday, Sunday, June 2nd, the Celebrate Israel Day Parade. We all know that we will not be the only ones in the city on that day. It is important that everybody be present, make our voices be heard as we stand proud. One people, one heart, June 2nd. And the week after that, here in the Five Towns, North Woodmere Park, in support of the Beit HaLochem, Friends of Israel Disabled Veterans, on Sunday, June 9th, the Five Towns 5K Walk for Israel. Here as well, there will be a Mariv, I believe, right in here, immediately following our program. A good evening to everyone.